We spent over 100 hours making this stained glass Holy Family window. We'll go through everything from the glass cutting, painting, assembly, and the final installation. You'll be a part of the process on how a 70-year-old studio crafts this unique work of art. Let's find out how it's done and stay until the end to see how the client reacted to the finished product. You'll also see 2 other window projects we completed in the same chapel. It all starts with the question, what does the customer want? In this case, they requested a stained glass window of the Holy Family. We showed them several pictures, and this is the style they requested. Beautifully simple and timeless. We try to take into the account the specific wishes of the client to best represent them as a faith community. So we went to work on creating a watercolor design. Our initial rendering had St. Joseph's head positioned to the side in more of a contemplating stance as he's thinking to himself about the strange events unfolding before his eyes. Now the client did prefer St. Joseph's gaze to be on baby Jesus, so with the partial approval, we drew out the design to the actual size on a 4-foot wide butcher paper, which will serve as the build pattern that we use to cut the glass and assemble the window on. We made this modification on the full-size patterns, which was approved, so we got to work. The first step, pulling glass. So we began by picking out the different colors. Red and amber for the border glass, a few pale blues and greens for the background, a second amber for the halos, green and brown for St. Joseph's drapery, a clear texture for baby Jesus swaddle, and a few blues and red violet for St. Mary's drapery. Now there is symbolic significance as well as tradition behind the colors that were selected. For St. Mary, she is traditionally depicted in a blue mantle with a white or pale blue veil. Her gown is traditionally white, but in this case the designer picked out a beautiful red violet. We'll take this heaping stack of glass over to the work table and see it all laid out. Here you're seeing the full palette chosen for this window. Fortunately, we've got over 900 glass types in stock at all times for both our studio use and for our retail customers, so we're pretty well prepared for most situations. Now we're off to get our cutter oiled and light table fired up to begin chopping it all down. We are starting with the background glass. It consisted of a few pale blues and greens. The intensities of the colors were carefully picked to have paler colors in the background, with the figure's drapery glass much more intense colors to make them stick out in front of the background glass and to become much more of a focal point. It's not a terribly complicated process. Since most of these glasses are not too dense, we can see easily through onto the pattern so we can cut the glass right on top. We're careful to cut on the smooth side, because cutting on the rough side can not only damage your glass scoring tool, but also yield inferior results. Check the card up on the screen to a full glass cutting tutorial I've made if that interests you. Next up we have the border glass. Here we used red and amber glasses. When designing windows, we aim to take into account existing architectural elements and liturgical appointment design motifs. The red and amber colors were chosen to blend with the existing altar and ambo, both of which had either gold or red incorporated within. This glass does have another notable feature, and that is the texture. This is called water glass, and it is one of the stained glass textures that are directional. If you look closely at this picture of the finished window, you'll see the borders are pointing out and away from the center. This is a purposeful effect to accentuate the central subjects. Especially when using this glass, you don't want to simply randomly orient them because it may look a bit off. Just one of the fine details that add up to a meaningful project. You'll notice that I place lines on the glass sometimes to emphasize that texture because when you're in flow and making great progress, it can be difficult to remember every single thing. So helping yourself out a little with small reminders like this will keep you right on track. The clear glass we use for all the faces and hands. We found that the nature of stained glass containing heavily varying textures along with different or inconsistent tints from batch to batch has made it too tricky to produce a consistent art style when doing many projects. So we have opted for clear glass for these areas so that we can paint on all the necessary detail to get the beautiful and consistent quality we desire. Here we have St. Joseph's drapery. St. Joseph was a carpenter and a man of the earth, so we selected earthy colors of green and brown. Here you see me using the grinder. This is a useful tool for any fine adjustments when a piece may be overcut slightly. This amber glass is for all of the halos. This color really gives a nice effect for the look of the halo. And this is actually the last glass that we are cutting. This little time lapse shows all the pieces coming together and this is the first time we're starting to really see something that resembles a finished product. I'm really happy with the way things are looking so far. It's satisfying to see this project go from a stack of glass to where we are now. But we still have a ways to go, so let's get to painting. The artist begins with the line work. This is the foundation for the rest of the details for the piece. The line work takes place on both the drapery and the face pieces. Once each layer is done, it goes into the kiln. Now, stained glass by itself is a beast of a craft, but when you add in painting, it's a whole new world. The glass paint we use are called, by the manufacturers, stainer colors. They are comprised of ground glasses and various minerals. The medium used is water, and the binder is gum arabic. There's not much texture once blended. It's similar to pushing water on a floor with a wet mop. Wet paint cannot be painted into paint that has dried because it will crack apart once fired. So the artist must masterfully plan how to paint so that they are always painting wet into wet. Once the paint dries, it can be removed very easily by even a light touch of a finger. The glass must be fired to nearly the melting point of glass, and the ground glass fuses pigments permanently onto the surface of the glass. Effects are created with multiple layers of paint, each which requires separate firings. The layers for the drapery in this case were around 3 to 4 firings. The faces and hands are normally 8 to 10. Since pigments can be removed, this allows manipulation of the paint pre-firing to create each specific effect. Since the glass is heated to almost melting point, there's a slow process of re-annealing that must occur before removing the glass from the kiln. Now, this stuff can be very toxic. That's why you see the artist wearing safety equipment, and we also have a few HEPA filters in the background sucking in any other debris. This particular window used 5 lead profiles for different effects: 1/2 inch, 3/8, a 5/16, a 1/4 inch, and an 1/8 inch. Here in the freeze frame, you can see the different lead profiles and how they contribute to the overall window. This is a useful tool to create subtle effects to emphasize different areas of the window. For the perimeter pieces, we normally use a wider 1/2 inch lead for some extra strength. This is another important and time-consuming step to assemble the window, where each piece is cut and placed to accommodate the piece of glass for a beautifully polished final product. The tools are very simple and inexpensive, but the time investment is immense, along with the rising cost of raw materials. Now, letting the window will give a way for the glass to become fully attached together, but it's not yet fully attached with lead alone. Solder is one of the main contributors to the strength and stability of a leaded panel. It's a lead and tin alloy that is melted with a hot iron at each joint to combine adjacent pieces of metal. Before soldering, one must clean up the surface of the channel. We normally use a wire brush and some flux meant for stained glass. It's important again to take safety precautions to limit your exposure to the chemicals such as lead by wearing gloves, respirators, and incorporating good ventilation into your shop. Once the first side is done, we flip it over to solder both sides. The exact same process. Now, this window is a little bit wobbly and shaky for the first flip, as only one side is soldered together so far. The size of a stained glass window is a critical consideration because if a single panel is too large, it can fail and start to bow prematurely due to the weight of itself pushing down on the bottom portion of the panel. When a window exceeds the allowable size, we break it up as needed to keep the design from being too heavily obstructed, but also to keep the size within acceptable parameters. This is one of the final stages prior to installation for our stained glass windows. Here we apply stained glass putty into all the voids to remove any rattling and add strength to these panels. It's a simple process: scooping material with the applicator brush, forcing it into the voids, and removing the excess. This is also the step where the craftsman will review the work for any defects, including any glass that may have become cracked, joints left unsoldered, or anything else they can spot. This is also the stage where reinforcing bars are added. The material we use is a galvanized steel flat bar soldered to each joint. Now, we always incorporate reinforcing bars into our designs instead of that being an afterthought. This way, we're not scrambling trying to figure out how to reinforce a project after it's been built. In this case, the bar is running along the neon yellow lines, where it's bent around different curves and angles and soldered at every joint. If I hadn't mentioned this item, it's a good chance you would have never even noticed them, and that's exactly what we want. It's a critical consideration during the design process where to place these, and to go unnoticed is the goal. Now the windows are ready for installation. So now it's time to make the trip. We did include the replacement of exterior glass in our scope of work, so once that was done, it was stained glass time. And this was a quick and easy installation because everything fit perfectly. And now that it's in, let's get out of the way and call in the client to see what they think about how everything turned out.
Wow. Oh my goodness, aren't you beautiful? Ooh. Oh my God. Look at this. Oh, Laura. You did great, you guys.
And with that, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you're interested, we have a few more videos up on the screen we think you might enjoy. If you'd like to inquire regarding a custom commission, check the description for details on how to connect with us. Thanks for watching.